Hello? Yes, hi. Hi, Flo. Oh, um, well, somewhere around 5 to 10. Sound good? Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, a few minutes. Okay, bye. Bye. Hi, Flo.
Hey Dave,
Hi, how are you doing?
doing great, thank you. And you?
Great. Yeah, I was counseling before, and that's why when you were calling, I wasn't able to answer the phone. But
Oh, that was all right. I just thought, just wanted to make sure I didn't go on too long.
oh, you're good. Yeah. Um, I talked to Father Mark yesterday, and I was
Oh,
I was surprised to hear that he's no, not yesterday. It was the day before or something. But anyway, I was surprised to hear that he's back home.
yes, yes. And evidently, so far, so good. He's doing well,
Yeah.
is what I'm
That's
hearing from his housekeeper. Um, anyway, whatever. She's his
yeah.
friend
Brent.
and housekeeper. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. It is great. Yeah. And
It'll be great until he falls again.
right. Yeah. And sounds like it's not a neurological thing that's causing the falling, but weakness in his knee or something.
Yeah.
So that's still bad, but better. Yeah. Hi, Art.
Yes.
I know. I'm fooling around with the sound. Can you hear it okay?
Oh, yeah, I can hear.
Okay.
Can you?
I need to turn it up just a little bit more.
Hi, Helen.
Hi,
So,
how's everybody?
Great.
I can see you're in your professional clothes if you were counseling this morning.
Yeah. 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 And I went to the parking lot service since I'm going to be preaching and celebrating next week. So I had to take notes, try to remember how to do everything again. I need to be retrained.
Oh, what is it like riding a bicycle?
Yeah. There you go.
Well, we missed this morning. Tom had a little bit of an upset tummy, and we decided we better not go
Yeah. Good
and be
idea.
around people.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly beautiful out there today. It was actually felt almost warm.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, almost.
that's great.
Yeah.
only
Well, I
in
hope there was
Texas.
a good crowd.
Yeah, I think there was a pretty good sized group. I'm not sure what their normal size is, but seemed like there must have been about 30 people or so.
That's about the mid-range.
Okay. Yeah. What were you saying, Art?
Only in Texas would it be that warm at Christmas.
I know. It's great.
It was so hot we had on the air conditioner last Christmas.
Wow.
Seeing the mural or whatever you have behind you, Art, and seeing the star, somebody said, "Are we supposed to have a Bethlehem? Is it Bethlehem star
Tomorrow,
or
yeah,
Bethlehem moon?"
it's several days, but tomorrow night at 6:15. Unfortunately, that's going to be during that service. It's supposed to be something like 45 minutes after sunset is the best time. That's just what someone wrote me.
Yeah, and it's you're supposed to look to the southwest, and the two planets will line up to appear as one. Yeah.
Well,
Can you hear it? I mean, can you
Yeah, I
hear
can
it?
hear it.
Hi, Bev.
Hi.
You're on. Great.
Yep, I'm just trying to figure out the best angle so I look better.
Well, last
Be
week
up
you were
like
up in the
this.
corner, and now you've moved
Not too
around.
bad.
Yeah, I
it's
got
all
a
about
bright
finding-
light behind me.
Oh, yeah.
There.
I have been humming the hymn that the La La Luli Lule. What is the actual name of it?
Oh,
Are
yeah.
you referring to the Coventry Carol?
That's it. That's it. About the mothers in Bethlehem
Yeah.
are grieving.
Uh-oh, something happened.
I've heard that for years
Oh,
and know some of the words, but I never realized the significance of it.
Oops.
So
Yeah.
that was
I'm going to try
it's
something here.
interesting because it's such an old carol and the sound of it is really old, isn't it?
it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm holding up my camera. I took pictures of the two planets
Oh, neat.
yesterday, and that's how close they were.
Yes.
Wow.
At any rate, they look like stars, but they're really planets.
That's neat.
Yeah.
And
Is that
so
what it's supposed to look like?
tomorrow night, they'll actually touch each other.
Wow.
Did you see that
Cool.
comet this summer?
No.
Did not.
We tried.
We went to one of the darkest places in the world, out on Scudic Point, and we didn't see it. And then we got home to our place in Maine, and it was right there. So
Between the wires.
yes. Well, we are right at 12:30, so we're going to go ahead and start. And I thought what we could do is just do it for a check-in. What do you need to make your Christmas maybe not perfect, but a really good one? Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Family.
Family.
Family. Yeah.
Hmm. Family, but I would say also a good Advent.
Good Advent. Get you ready for it. Yep. Good. What else? Yeah. What would it take for you, Bev, to have a really great Christmas Day?
Well, we're not going to have much family, so I'm going to have to come up with something else.
No, we would like to have family. We
Yeah,
can,
we'd
Right,
but
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Not necessarily what you're going to have, but what you would really like to have. So family's up there for probably all of us.
Right.
What else? Good Advent, getting ready for it. What else?
the long-term Christmas tradition was actually 12 days of feasting. You
Yeah,
go back
12
to the
days.
Middle Ages.
Yep.
So they would feast and drink for 12 days. So that's what I think would be a perfect crate.
What
Yeah,
I want to
Glühwein
know is who's
and,
doing the cooking.
lots of ham and turkey and
love.
Yeah.
for 12 days.
And the cleaning up.
I'd like to
The
be able to
voice of
do that
Pratchett.
without gaining any weight.
Yeah, and then how to
If I could twitch my nose
Yeah.
like Samantha.
Yeah.
So probably for most of us, there needs to be some decorations around. Special foods. What's your special food that you need for a good Christmas?
Dressing.
Dressing. Okay.
We're having a very non-traditional because my daughter and her family can't be here.
Mhm.
It's just kind of the cap on, I mean, we certainly celebrate the religious everything, and but we're having Italian food,
Italian food.
totally different. So we won't be reminded of how sad we are that everything's so weird.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good, good. Hi, Glenda. We're just
Hello.
talking about what's it take to have a really good Christmas day, and we've all agreed that families top of the list, the religious part with Advent and with services, and special foods. Even if we deviate from the norm and have Italian food, I
Or
carry
tamales.
tamales. There you go. Yeah,
Y'all are making me hungry.
I know. I know. Well, when I was growing up, the Christmas cookies were the big thing. So my mom was just really into Christmas cookies, and yeah, those were the big ones when I was a kid. Any other things that were big for you?
For Christmas traditions, or
Yeah.
I, the thing that came into my mind that I hadn't thought about in a while was on Christmas Eve. It seems like, I'm sure we didn't decorate our tree on Christmas Eve, but back in those days, our church didn't put up a tree until the fourth Sunday in Advent in the parish hall, and everybody helped decorate it. And it seems like our family decorated ours around that time, but the treat for me, everybody was having wine and champagne and probably scotch and bourbon. And I got ginger ale. And that has always been for me a very special thing, because it's not a drink I drink a lot, but it's kind of a special occasion to me drink because of that.
Okay, so if Carrie's going to go wild on Christmas, there's going to be ginger ale involved, huh?
Such a partier.
Yeah.
I was about 8 when this happened, so I might add a little to the ginger ale
There
now.
we go. There we go. Okay, anything else?
My family, we're all teachers, and so we never put up our tree till the evening of the last day of school before Christmas. And much to my brother's disgust. Of course, back then they were all live trees. And we very often, we lived in East Texas, so we had friends with land, and we very often went out onto their land and just cut down a tree.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that was an exciting day for us. We spent most Christmas Eves and Christmas Day with my grandparents, and my grandfather would not put up a tree before Christmas Eve. So he went out in the woods and cut down a tree and brought it in on Christmas Eve, and we decorated it, and that sucker came down on New Year's Day no matter what.
Oh,
Yep.
Oh,
So he was very, very rigid about that.
Okay. Well, great. So that lots of things that go into making a special Christmas. I have to admit that sitting around and thinking about the incarnation was not really a big thing on my list for most Christmases. I'm glad now that as an Episcopalian, we get to have 12 days of Christmas. And because of a good Advent build up, we've been meditating on preparations in many different angles. And then on Christmas Day, we enter into the fullness of what it means to be human. And that involves a lot of family stuff, a lot of food stuff, delights to the senses, which involve many different things, but the lights and other cards and gifts. And we just celebrate being human, because that's what Jesus did. That's the first Christmas, is just how great it is to be human. And I'm glad that we have the rest of the season, the 12 days, to be able to think about this whole incarnation business. But today we're going to cheat just a tad, and we're going to really look at incarnation. And we're going to look at it in general, and then we're going to look at some specific stories to see if the incarnation pattern emerges in 2 stories that we're going to study today. And Flo's going to lead out a little bit of discussion or overview of the 4th wise man. and Helen is going to lead out an overview of A Christmas Carol. And we're going to take a look and see what we learn about being human and what it means, what we learn about God, and what this makes a difference for us in our lives. So as we begin, I want to just draw our meditation to a 4th century hymn on the Nativity. And this was written by Ephraim the Syrian. And most of the Syriac tradition has been lost to us and just revived within the last like 30, 40 years when they've started to find more and more of these ancient writings from Christians from Syria. And Ephraim was a priest in the 4th century, and he wrote like 50 some hymns just on incarnation.
Wow.
So here's part of one. I'll just read a couple of the verses, and this will be our opening meditation and prayer. He wrote, "Your mother is a cause for wonder. The Lord entered her and became a servant. He who is the Word entered and became silent within her. Thunder entered her and made no sound. There entered the shepherd of all, and in her he became the lamb, bleeding as he came forth. Your mother's womb has reversed the roles. The establisher of all entered in his richness, but came forth poor. The exalted one entered her, but came forth meek. The splendorous one entered her, but came forth having put on a lowly hue. The mighty one entered and put on insecurity from her womb. The provisioner of all entered and experienced hunger. He who gives drink to all entered and experienced thirst. Naked and stripped, there came forth from her he who clothes all." I just love this idea of Mary's womb as a crucible that transforms God into human. Anyway, I don't know if we can do much better than Ephraim the Syrian from the 4th century. So as we think about incarnation, well, anything we talk about God is very indirect language. And so we talk by analogy. We use shorthand like Trinity to describe something of God. We have these huge concepts that are wrapped up in kind of large words, but small phrases. Like incarnation is absolutely an enormous mystery that we're going to probably spend eternity trying to figure that one out and never get there. So when we talk about God, we can't really talk about things very directly. We mainly talk about what God is not, the via negativa, and we try to affirm some things that God is, and then we rely on revelation because our minds can't wrap around this stuff, and we use analogies, kind of like a painter would enter into his or her own painting to be able to make a correction in it, but has to do it from the inside. That would be an example of an analogy. But everything we talk about with God, with incarnation especially, is going to be very finite and leaves a lot left open. So we engage the heart and we engage the head, and we find that the incarnation makes sense to the heart a lot more than it does to the head. One of our great ways that we can talk about these things is through stories from our culture that are written by people who are Christians, disciples, and they can share stories that can be for the public consumption. So the person doesn't have to be of a specific faith in order to enter into a spirit of the incarnation. So we're going to take a look at 2 stories today, and thought we could first take a look at the 4th wise man. And before Flo gives us a thumbnail sketch of it, how many of you have read that or seen the movie? Okay, Glenda, Art?
I may have, I can't remember.
Okay. Susan, how about you? Have you seen or heard the 4th wise man?
What is the movie? No, sir.
No, okay. And I just watched it yesterday. There was a version of it that was on YouTube, and the fun part was that it starred Charlie Sheen, and Martin Sheen was in it,
No.
and Elliot Gould,
Oh,
and
wow.
Alan Arkin. I mean, to see them in the story was just a kind of a hoot. But Flo, would you give us kind of a thumbnail sketch and anything you'd like to share about the fourth wise man?
The story is all, sometimes it's called the other wise man, sometimes the fourth wise man. I think the official is the other wise man, but anyway, Henry Van Dyke, not to be confused with Dick, is wrote this story, and it's called either a novella or a long short story or a short story. Anyway, in 1895. One thing you might remember about his work is the poem that is There She Goes. That I believe his name. That's the one that's so often maybe included in a certain burial services, or it will be on a sympathy card where it's talking about the ship moving away and
Yes.
growing smaller as it goes to the horizon, and people saying, there she goes, there she goes. And then there's a little more to it explaining. And then the last part says, but there's someone on the other side where ship is growing larger and saying, here she comes. Anyway, I received that when my husband died in a sympathy card, and I still anyway. But that is in the days of Caesar Augustus, and the ruler of many kings, including Herod, who reigned in Jerusalem. There lived among the mountains of Persia a certain man named Artaban. Artaban was one of the magi, whichever you, who study the heavens in search of truth about God. He and his three friends from afar had discovered in the ancient writings that there would be a beautiful star that would rise at the time that a great king was born. And so over a period of time, this was not just a sudden revelation, it was over months and years that they were studying this. They agreed that when that star rose, they would meet at a temple. These are in the Middle East, what we would call, in the story, it's in Babylonia. And they would meet at a certain spot and they would go together. Of course, we know the other three by their traditional names. They're not in the Bible, but Casper, Melchior, and I had it. What's the third?
Balthasar?
Balthasar or something.
Yeah, Balthasar.
Balthasar.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, and so Artaban had sold, he felt the time was near. And so he had sold all of his possessions and bought three very beautiful jewels. That was to be his gift to the new king. So he's on the patio, quote unquote, one evening, and he saw this special star rising, or there would be some sign that it was going to be. So he immediately, he packed and he had everything ready to go, jumped on his Arabian horse, wonderful animal named Vasca, and took off. The message was within 10 days, if he was not at the appointed, which was the temple in Babylon, they would go on without him because they had to get there at the right time. And so he races off over hill and dale, and was close, but not there yet. And his horse stops, and he's thrust off, and he sees this man who is inert, that he thinks he's dead, but he does make a little movement, clutches the robe of Artaban. And so Artaban thinks, I have to do something for this man. And so, but if I don't get there, they'll leave without me. But as if you know the story, he does. He stops and he provides him with nourishment and spends a day or two, however amount of time, it's not specific, spends his time with him. And consequently, when he arrives at the meeting place, his friends have gone on. Has that ever happened to you, that you were supposed to meet somebody and you didn't get there in time, so you had to go on by yourself? Well, that happened to Artaban, and they had left him a message, and that he was to follow. So then, oh, and the stranger that he helped, after he had explained why he was at that spot where Artaban had, said, oh, he was a Jew of the diaspora, I guess. Anyway, he was a Jew, and don't go to Jerusalem because the scriptures say that this will take place in Bethlehem. So anyway, he went back, sold his, or whatever he did with his horse, and sold one of his jewels, the sapphire, to buy for camel and all the equipment, because it's a long through the desert for him to go. So he there goes one of his jewels, but he thinks it's worth it to get to be at the birth of this king. He travels for months, well, not months, but quite a while. And by the time he gets to Bethlehem, and he talks to people, he finds out that there was an unusual couple that had a baby, and they didn't really know much about them, but all of a sudden in the middle of the night, they packed up and moved on, and they heard they were going to Egypt. And about that time, he's has knocked at a door, and this young woman who was cradling a baby had come, and she invited him in to have a meal and to go on to look for. And at that moment, there are soldiers in the street, and there's all this chaos and hubbub, and the young mother hides in the corner of her cottage, and a soldier comes to the door. Are there any babies in here? And Artaban goes to the door, and he holds this ruby, and he says, no, there are no babies here. And anyway, the soldier takes it and moves on. So there's gone another of his gift, but he had to do it because, and so finally he leaves and heads for Egypt. Have any of you ever seen any of the paintings? There are 3 or 4, but one particularly that I like about the rest on the escape to Egypt. I'm not sure that's right, but it shows a woman with a baby kind of nesting in the corner of the Sphinx's feet. And then there's a donkey in the foreground and a man sleeping on the ground. I've always loved, I think it's a Christian, I don't think Caravaggio did that. I looked it up, Meeson, an artist I don't know. But anyway, there's several different versions of this, and it's poignant. I don't know, it just kind of gets me. Anyway, so he heads off for Egypt, and he travels all over the Middle East, probably Syria, who knows. And he traveled because he's still looking for the king. And he travels for about 30 some odd years. And he thought, well, they said Jerusalem wasn't the place, but maybe I'll just go to Jerusalem. I'm about to die anyway, so that's as good a place as any. And as he enters Jerusalem, there is chaos because people are so excited. They're going to crucify 2 thieves. And then the big star of the show is this man who calls himself the Son of God. And so Artaban is heading toward the site for the crucifixion. And there's more, he stumbles over a group of soldiers dragging a young woman along. And she breaks away and grabs Artaban's feet, save me, a sort of thing. And she said, my daddy was a merchant and he owes money and they're taking me away as a slave, and fate worse than death. You wonder if it's, what do we call it here well, anyway, I assume into some sort of, you get the impression maybe some sort of sexual slavery because it's a fate worse than death. And so I'm going to read just from the last here so you can hear the words maybe of the author more so than from me. Artaban was so close to the end of his search for what he thinks would be his king. Could he give it all up now? And then he looked into the eyes of the helpless girl. One thing was certain. Rescuing her would be a true deed of love. And wasn't the ability to love the gift of the one true God? He placed the pearl in the hand of the weeping girl. This is your ransom, child, and it is the last of my treasures which were to be given to the king. At that moment, the sky darkened, the echoing peals of thunder rumbled through the hot streets of Jerusalem. The walls of the houses rocked to and fro as the earth rolled like the waves of the sea. The soldiers fled in terror, and suddenly a heavy section of roof tile broke loose and crashed down on the other wise man. As Artaban fell to the ground, he heard a quiet yet insistent voice speak to him over the thunder. Artaban, the voice called softly, you have been a good and faithful servant. I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you brought me clothes. I was in prison and you visited me. Come now to the rest I have prepared for you. Not so, Lord, whispered Artaban with the last of his strength. When did I do all these things for you? And the voice answered, whenever you helped one of my people, you helped me. Well, one last page and I can't. The peace of understanding fell upon Artaban's soul like a gentle rain, and he smiled. His journey on earth was ended. His treasures were accepted. The other wise men had found the king.
Thank you.
Good ending.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
That's why I wanted to, of course, these are not Van Dyke's actual words because this woman, Pamela Kennedy, had shortened it, and I think I showed you the other day the drawings. They're beautiful drawings. It's a children's book or young adult, but it is a beautiful book.
Did the illustrations?
Yeah, thanks.
So it has, I'm going to say this and I'll hush. The first time I read that, I don't have the book. Yes, I do. Here it is. My mother subscribed to Book of the Month Club or I don't know what. But anyway, this was a book that came in the late 40s to our house. I was in either junior high or high school. And it is full of, it's a Christmas treasury, and it is full of all kinds of wonderful old, it was compiled in 1945. And our fire kind of played havoc with it. You can see the back, but why it was saved out of the fire, it was just at the right place. I think it was under a table or something. But anyway, it doesn't have I need to have it rebound because it is, oh, such a treasure. Anyway, enough.
Yeah, great. Well, let's reflect on the story a little bit as to what we see going on spiritually, theologically. And this one's not a real abstract kind of story like Christmas Carol. You get very indirect connections, but this one's got some pretty significant direct connections to the gospel. But we're going to look instead of what is there anything in this story that really pops out to you about what it means to be human and what it and anything about divinity or the coming together of those two, which we see in the incarnation. Anything that came up for anybody? Carrie, how about you? I think you're on mute. Are you still on mute? Or is it computer? Do you have a computer problem there? Yeah, we can't hear you, Carrie. There you go.
I couldn't get my mouse to work to unmute it, and there's no other way, I don't think. I don't know. What struck me, I mean, it's a beautiful story, and I don't think I have read this one. But when Flo was telling it, when she was talking about someone came to the door of the house and asked if there were any young children or babies there, and the guard, I don't remember, said no, and they moved on. It just reminded me of, I mean, to me, that is very human, and how we would all react to something like that. If someone came to our house looking to do bad stuff to somebody we loved, you do whatever you can to protect that person, which is what was done.
Yeah. Yeah, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think, was one of the few theologians who actually developed a theology of lying. And he said that when it came to people like the Nazis coming to take people, that it was a Christian duty to lie at that point. And I think we see it in Artavan, or whatever his name is, that it was the compassionate thing to do is lie. There's no child here. Yeah.
Oh, one of the things I was trying to shorten it as much as I could, but when he's giving the ruby to the soldier, and he's praying in his heart, said, I'm sorry I lied. So that was brought out in the story.
Okay,
that
good.
he was aware that he was.
Great. Okay. And I got bounced off, so I had to get back in frantically. But so I don't know if you already covered this, but I love the way that Van Dyke is able to weave in so many of the different stories that we see in the Gospels. So that the pearl of great price shows up, and caring for the Samaritan, caring for the person, and I think he also does something with lepers and restoring sight and using his physician's power as a magi. But we see all these rhyming things happening in his life and in his story. And then the ending, when he discovers Jesus, but he never thought he'd ever met Jesus. And yet Jesus says, yeah, I've been there. You've met me so many different times. So it's that end judgment of the sheep and the goats. Just a really clever and beautiful story of interweaving the human life that is caught up into the divine, and we see the rhyming that goes on between the human life and what the divine life is. In Judaism, there's a form of mysticism called Merkaba mysticism, and it's the doing, kind of like doing on earth as God would have us do in heaven, but to rhyme or to mimic what's going on in the divine. Anything else you saw in that story that anybody wants to bring out?
It really struck me how he was lost, basically, I guess, for 30 years. Is that right? Looking for something and searching, and that is kind of the human condition.
Yeah.
You know?
And then he found it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
but
found
he,
him.
Yeah, and he had no idea that he was really finding it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably thought he was a failure the whole time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Wasn't getting done what he was supposed to get done, that this godly mission. And then, yeah, that just,
And then he was empty-handed at
Yeah.
the end, and he had nothing
Mhm.
to give.
Yeah.
And here he's been giving all these years.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful on the human condition then. So, yeah, the things that the culture says we need to do in order to have a valuable life are not necessarily at all what God requires of us. And so people who are loving and compassionate, but may not have succeeded in many other ways, are going to find out that their lives were hugely successful. Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
it must have been painful for him to, feel like like you said, lost for 30 years, or not being able to accomplish what he thought was laid out for him that way.
Yeah.
That had to have been just torturous for all those years to, really not be getting anything done.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to the story of the time that he's traveling and searching, and the people that he meets and the things that he does. But uh, anyway, it's worth sitting down and reading the whole thing, and not just the little short version here.
Hey,
His
Carrie?
writing is very good.
I'm just curious to know how, if Flo knows, or some of you others may know, about how long is the book? Is it a 300 page or less or more?
No, it's as it says, it's either called a novella
Oh,
or a
that's
long
right.
short story.
I forgot that point.
I think Glenda was showing the
Yeah. I haven't read it in a long time, but I'd say 40 to 60, somewhere in there.
yes, I think I could look that.
Yeah.
But,
Good. And yeah, I was, again, I just watched the movie, so I'm sure there's some deviations, but with Susan's point and with Bev's, that in his journey, he keeps getting interrupted. And it could be, something I could feel real frustrated if I was that guy. Like I wasn't getting to where I was supposed to be. And yet it was all the interruptions that were the times he met Jesus. So yeah, thank you for bringing out that point.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You think there's something there?
Yeah. I think it really brings out the human condition. Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
keep that in mind, because my recurring nightmare is not being able to get to school on time. Just be stopped for this and stopped for that, and worrying about my students and, who's with them. Is anybody with them? Will I have a classroom left when I get back? All of that. So next time I have that dream, I'll look for Jesus along the way.
There you go. Yeah.
That's good.
That's great.
that's a very good point, Glenda. A good thought.
Is that a 2020 recurring dream, or have you had that since you retired?
I had that at least once a year through my whole teaching career. I've been retired for 17 years, and I probably had it once a year for 17 years.
That's great. I did want to point out one thing. There's a short story by Tolstoy called Papa Panov's Special Christmas, and it follows almost the same theme or same plot line as the Fourth or the Other Wise Man. So that it's an interesting story written by Tolstoy that I can recommend to you. It's really great. But he is a cobbler who you've probably heard the story, but he wakes up in the morning. He wants to see Jesus. It's on this Christmas. He wants to really see Jesus, and all these people come by, and he's looking for Jesus in all of them. And he sees this person who's very cold, and he invites her in to have a warm drink and sit by the fire. And anyway, he does all these things, and then at the end of the day, Jesus shows up to him and tells him that he was there in these people. So same storyline, but different author. And around the same time too. I think it was mid 19th century.
There is a poem by, I think, Edgar Guest that was written back, and it is How the Great Guest Came, and it is the same story, but in poetic form. And then as the evening came, and he had, Jesus didn't come, and he was so disappointed. And then the voice comes. I don't think Jesus in, for some, but that's not exactly the same story and by an American kind of second-rate poet. But
so there must be a lot of people out there who are frustrated, feeling like they're not getting anything done.
It's not in 2020, but it sure applies.
It sure does.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on then to probably the most famous Christmas story, A Christmas Carol. And Flo, you want to tell us about Dickens?
No,
And
that's
sorry, not Flo, Helen.
it's Helen.
Yeah, Helen. Sorry.
This was one of the most fascinating research things I've done in a long time. Of course, I knew the historical aspects of what was going on in England and the world at that time. It was written in 1843, but is applicable at all stages of time because this is a continuing struggle. There's long been academic debate as to whether it was intended as a religious tome or a secular one. And I decided I don't think it matters because what has it come to mean to us today? The original title, get this, An Appeal to the People of England on Behalf of a Poor Man's Child. That was the original title that was later changed to A Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens had been born one of many children to a middle-class family, but his father squandered a lot of the money and ended up in debtor's prison when Charles was 12. So, as was the custom of that time, the family went with the father, except Charles was finishing a school term or something, so he stayed. And to earn his keep with this family, he went to work at some kind of a blackening factory where he worked many hours a day in awful conditions. I mean, the child was 12 years old. He was later able to finish school. His parents got out of debtor's prison and all, but and he was quite a successful author, but sort of fell out of favor. He came to the United States and said the Americans are uncivil and unhygienic, and people started not liking him a lot. So it was about fall of 1843 when his publisher said, you better get going on something. Also at this time came out this major government report on child labor, which we all have heard stories about that. And you all do know the story. I mean, I don't need to go really through the story of A Christmas Carol, do I? Everybody's familiar? And but when the Industrial Revolution started, it started in homes, like in cottage industries, and people stopped farming, and many people went to the city looking for work, and factories developed, and thus the huge need for labor. And poverty just was rampant all over. And the modern philosophy on poverty was that it was sort of like a character flaw. And I think some people see this today. The modern idea of workers in an economy was that if you helped the downtrodden worker too much, then he might propagate and bear more children and lead to a surplus of undesirable populations. I mean, that was the thought.
Like feeding deer.
Yes, yes. It's and you know, this is just horrible to even think of. And some even said it's better to starve and decrease your surplus population than to allow this to happen. And different people approached this huge gap of economic wealth, which anytime you see that in a big society, that huge gap, it leads to tremendous unrest. Of course, Marx and Engels said the only answer you can do is a revolution, so that society can take care of everybody, provide education and healthcare for everybody, care for everybody, that kind of thing. And Dickens said, no, that's not good. I don't like that. There must be another way. And his idea was that, and he wrote that employers are responsible for the well-being of their employees. Their workers are not of value only to the extent to which they contribute to a product for the cheapest possible labor cost. They are of value as, quote, fellow passengers to the grave. In other words, we're all in this human condition.
Mm-hmm.
In the words of Scrooge's nephew, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. Employers owe their employees as human beings no better, but no worse than themselves. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, so what he intended this pamphlet, which it's also a novella, become a novella, was to be like a sledgehammer to awaken people and blow out these modern ideas about workers and the economy. Think of in the story when it's the ghost of today and they see the little creatures' ignorance and want. He said, well, I've lost that quote. Anyway, that the ignorance, if we continue to have ignorance of the want in our world, we are basically not going to be able to make it. And that we must treat those that are downtrodden better. And of course, as he wakes up and he becomes, you know, a generous man, that prize turkey was meant to be the salvation that he gives to the Cratchit family. And eventually he does give them the raise. And when he was asked about all this, and you can see this in so many of his writings, think of Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, and all these stories he wrote about working class people. He said, I myself had no advice, no counsel, no encouragement, no consolation, no assistance, no support of any kind from anyone that I can call to mind. As I hope to go to heaven, this didn't happen to me. And that's what he wanted society to change. So, you know, we see it through our own Christian lens as the way we should be in taking care of others. Just like, you know, the second of the great commandments, do unto others as you would have them do to you. So it has become the much beloved A Christmas Story, even though it's really started out very, very different. But it's about the whole human condition, like I said.
Yeah, it is. Oh, that's great, Helen. Thank you so much. Can anybody think in terms of what this story says about being human, and his suggestions about the divine coming into our lives, or a little bit more veiled than in our first story? But what does it say to you about God and humanity and the coming together of the two?
Well, the change After it's been a long time since I've read it, but when after he's been visited by past and future, uh, he's just had a total change of heart, and that so that is. Well, I had a point. I was going to piggyback from yours, but it's a wonderful story. We would love for that to happen to the world. Just one day we wake up and everything is But at least he did have what is there's a term for change of heart? Is that
Metanoia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Conversion.
Anyway, but he did have
That's a fancy word.
It's a fancy.
It is. I've not heard it.
Oh,
Yeah, and I think for most of us, we change. We have that change of heart when we are when something outside crashes in, and usually there's a setting up of it with hitting bottom, so that we crack hard, and then we're ready for some input, and that input comes in these various ways. In this case, by these three ghosts that show up. And then there's a change of heart. So there's a sense of transcendence that's outside of ourselves that crashes in, and we can't live our little lives again.
Well, all of a sudden you hear better.
Yeah. Yep.
I was thinking about, God made us to live in community, and there Scrooge was trying to live completely on his own.
Ah.
He had to, in some ways, depend on his employees to help him make a living, but he didn't feel any responsibility for them. And I've thought over time about how he got to that point, with all the disappointments and everything. And when you said you have to hit bottom and crack open, I've always thought of his life as being having a hard shell built over him over time, and the shell getting more and more layers and harder and harder. And so when he did hit bottom and crack open, uh, before that, he couldn't really see the world as it was. All he could see was what was in his little shell.
Wait, remember he had been hurt very badly.
Yes.
He loved
Yes.
this woman, and
Right.
it was his responsibility.
Yes.
It's a very traditional thing. You went out and made money. They stayed home and took care of the kids. I mean, that was it. And so,
well, and his childhood had been difficult, and and then the thing with this woman, and all of those experiences just layered the shell, another layer and another layer and another layer, until it was so thick and hard that he was completely encompassed in that shell and could not see what was going on around him.
And someone opened his eyes, he had an epiphany.
That's right. The shell cracked open and there was the world.
And what's your word? Metanoia?
Metanoia.
Yes.
Means to turn around. And there's certainly, I think Helen did such a great job pointing out the economic aspects to society. And it does bring up this whole difference between an economy of gift and the economy that's based on earning. And the gift economy is a very ancient religious economy that God gives all. And that has gone away pretty much, especially in the Industrial Revolution. And as we entered, well, even in the Middle Ages, when it shifted over from nobility to a moneyed economy. A lot of our views of human beings and of life have changed because we think we've got to that everything we work for is what we earn and it is ours, as opposed to this idea of we are given many gifts and we are stewards. So we don't own the stuff. We are people who distribute. Um,
The
and I,
noblesse oblige.
yeah, and of course the nobility were given so much, but usually there was training that went along with it on how to take care of their people because they were dependent on them for as a workforce. The nouveau riche that come about after or because of the Industrial Revolution never had that training, and they have this illusion that they earned it all, they own it, they're the ones who get to decide, as opposed to a mutual distribution. I've heard it said that God has not been the problem in giving us enough for everyone to be fed and taken care of, that it's a human distribution problem, not God's providence problem.
This is what we talked about earlier, and about you never really know someone until you walk in their shoes.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what Scrooge did too. He went back and he walked in his own shoes, so to speak, through time, and saw at the very end a horribly unkempt, uncared for grave that no one cared about, that no one cared for him, but Tiny Tim's was all neat and tidy and often visited by his family, and no one visited Scrooge's. And so, we often don't have our own epiphanies until we've been through things. Also, we say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know how you feel." Well, you really don't, but you can try to.
Mm-hmm.
We can all be more empathetic.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the opportunities or even the vision of an opportunity that many of us do.
What do you think was the defining moment or defining epiphany that he had? Was it how the graves were that he saw in his?
Well, he was very saddened by the loss of the lady, and saw that she was happy. She had a large family and she was very happy, and he still loved her. And then he was very saddened in the present with the children of ignorance and want. And he said, "Well, can't you do something for them to save them?" And the ghost said, "Are they worth saving? Does it make any difference? Just less population, sort of." And then when he saw how he was remembered, I think all of that just sort of gradually opened his eyes.
Yeah. And there was something about observing the grief that Bob Cratchit had for Tiny Tim when he died, and the emptiness, and Tiny Tim, I think, would really represent the person who has nothing to offer, and is not a provider or a producer in the economy.
It has no worth in terms of production. Yeah. And it's just odd that for Dickens, it was just, he had to have some money. He was about to go broke if he didn't write something. He wrote it that fall. It was published on the 19th of December. And he had to get his own illustrators and everything, because the publisher said, this is not going to work. This isn't going to be good. And he said, "Yes, it will. Yes, it will." And it's sold out by Christmas Eve.
Wow.
And they ended up doing just immediately so many more productions of it. He was quite successful during his lifetime. He didn't end up making as much money off of this because he got pirated a lot.
I heard a story on NPR recently. By the next Christmas after he wrote the book, it had been turned into a play, and some form of that story has been performed on stage every year somewhere in the world since the story was written.
And he used to go down and do his
he did readings.
And sometimes the authors would produce the plays.
Yeah.
And odd stuff, that so much stuff I didn't know.
Well, his great however many greats grandson, who shows up at the Dickens on the Strand every year, this year did the reading in England for the BBC, I think, and it was broadcast or will be broadcast. And he used the script from Dickens' reading.
Sounds cool.
Why do you suppose, I mean, that this has been universally loved, universally so popular to be continued? What? And it's a nice story, but what is the
Well, it's the Christian message. Like I said, the second commandment, doing for others.
Mhm.
As you would hope, as a child, no one helped him, no one mentored, no one consoled him. He felt pretty unloved. He was left at 12. And again, we always see it through our own lens. We all, society is getting farther and farther and farther apart. And I think this is as timely today as it was in 1843.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, we all identify that we don't want to be that downtrodden.
But it's got to be
It's-
good news too that this didn't happen. This awakening, this metanoia, didn't happen for him when he was young. He was, and it's like there's still hope, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
It's hopeful.
Good point.
yeah?
Yeah.
And it's not just the Christian message, because it's been translated into, I think they said 43 or 45 languages, and been performed all over the world in cultures that are not Christian.
Oh,
and
well,
been well received.
Virtually every culture has some sort of faith story, and virtually every faith story has a golden rule kind of thing.
Yes,
Do
yes.
unto others as you would have them
Yes.
do to you.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much.
Y'all are so smart.
I just have
Yeah.
one question.
Yeah.
It's a
So-
burden.
I think Scrooge, which one of the spirits was the Holy Spirit that visited Scrooge?
Ah, wow. That's a good question. Way to drop the bomb on us as we're trying to finish, Art. But that's
What do you think, Art?
I think it was probably the Christmas Past,
Hmm.
because it was a convicting
convicting. Yeah,
It was
spirit.
a what?
convicting.
Convicting spirit.
Yeah, oh, that's good.
Past was convicting.
Wasn't he?
I don't know. I would think of future, because here you're dying. No one cares.
Oh, well, yeah,
Nobody cares.
I guess they were all pretty convicting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit's in all of them. Yeah.
I guess his epiphany was that his life had been pointless and useless, and just the opposite from the other story.
Yeah.
Where at the very end he discovered that his life had really had meaning. So they kind of went in opposite directions.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Good putting together.
Yeah. Nice.
Trying to find a link.
Yeah. Nice. Good link. Well, these were. Thank you both. Thank you, all of you. I mean, and as Flo said, it is a burden to be so bright.
What I should have said, it must be a burden.
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't either.
And I think it really shows that, within this group, everybody's a teacher. We all contribute, and then we provide for this thing. Before we end, Janice wanted us to talk about what to do next. So I think we're taking off next Sunday, and then we'll start again with something on January the 3rd. She said wants to know your opinion about a book by Richard Rohr called Falling Upward, and if anyone would like to have that as our study for the next couple months. It's a 13-chapter book. Have any of you read it yet?
No, but I
No,
read
it
a lot.
hasn't come.
I read the reviews, and I read just a basic synopsis of it, and I think it would be a fabulous study. But
What's it called? Falling Upward?
Yep.
and I'm all in on doing something from Richard Rohr or
I like
by
him.
him.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a big fan too. It's been years since I've read the book. I loved it back then. She mentioned that there's also like a companion study guide that she would recommend that we also, for those who want to really get into it, would have. Otherwise, we just do our normal kind of discussion. I suggested to her that we might each take a chapter and do like we did today, where someone gives the thumbnail sketch in case someone hasn't read it or is just joining into the group. And then we springboard off of that, maybe some of the questions from the study guide. How,
That's a good idea.
y'all in? Everybody in?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Everybody feel comfortable taking a chapter?
Not on January 3rd.
No. I'll take January 3rd. And then maybe then we can also just see who wants what chapter. Sound good?
So just kind of an introduction on the 3rd. We don't need to have read.
Right.
I'm such a laboriously slow reader. I have to take a lot of time to read.
Okay. Well, we will just
So
have
Arthur, get the book and the study guide.
Well, she's also said that the church can buy a number of the books and or study guides. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and order it, please do. I'm going to tell her tomorrow that we're interested in.
What's the author's name again, please?
Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R.
Yeah, and there's a Falling Upwards that's a different book that I almost went to. So it's just Upward with no S.
Good to know. Okay. So I'll tell her we're in. Is that right? We'll give it a go. And then I'll do the introductory kind of stuff on the January 3rd one.
I'm just throwing this out. Have mentioned this to Janice. I would like sometime to really do a Bible study of a particular book, maybe, or a particular theme or something, some real scriptural study.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's acceptable in the Episcopal Church, but
we try to stay away from the Bible flow.
I've been an Episcopalian. I was a Baptist before I was an Episcopalian.
All right.
I should say you should just read your prayer book, but I'm kidding.
Well, no, it's all there.
It is all there, but it's certainly okay to do a Bible study.
Yeah, but I loved the studies that Bill Fowler led us through with the Book of Common Prayer and the different kinds of services and what we do when. It was very brief, but I thought those were fascinating. But piggybacking with what Flo said, I am a cradle Episcopalian, and I feel like I'm basically biblically illiterate because we talked about faith and love and grace and mercy and hope. We didn't really talk Bible stories and the books and all that. So I'm real embarrassingly ignorant.
Okay. Well, she did mention that the small groups are going to be doing a Bible study starting, I guess, in the new year. And she didn't want to have two Bible studies going on. She wanted something a little bit different. So I forget which book it is that the small groups
I just got a book, and it's about Judges, about the book of Judges. Is that the one we're doing?
I think that's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I just ordered it. I didn't know why. I just to have it when.
We should start out with something simple and easy to understand. The Book of Revelations comes to mind.
Start at the end. Huh?
I'm on it. Okay, well, as we close, we're going to go back to Ephraim, the Syrian.
But I want to thank you first, Dave, for leading us.
Oh,
Yes.
So
my
ably.
This is such a fun group to be with. So yeah, this is fun. And the discussion really brought out these timeless kind of stories of that really hit us in our heart to evoke those feelings of something better, this better life and this conversion for all of us. I'm not sure why the Nutcracker is a part of the Christmas cultural thing. So at some point, maybe next year, we'll tackle something as difficult as the Nutcracker and try to figure out,
December 2021.
yeah, we'll try to figure out why. Okay, well let's close by just hearing again the words from Ephraim the Syrian from 4th century. Your mother is a cause for wonder. The Lord entered her and became a servant. He who is the Word entered and became silent within her. Thunder entered her and made no sound. There entered the shepherd of all, and in her he became the lamb, bleeding as he came forth. Your mother's womb has reversed the roles. The establisher of all entered in his richness, but came forth poor. The exalted one entered her, but came forth meek. The splendorous one entered her, but came forth having put on a lowly hue. The mighty one entered and put on insecurity from her womb. The provisioner of all entered and experienced hunger. He who gives strength to all entered and experienced thirst. Naked and stripped there came forth from her he who clothes all. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful, very happy Christmas, even though it's 2020. So God bless you all.
Thank
Bless you
you.
all.
Thanks again.
And bless us, everyone.
Yes, humbug. Okay, bye.
Just gonna start by
Hmm.
Are Garrett and Katie coming? Oh. Okay. Okay, usual time. That's fine. I'll be here. Okay, bye.